Good evening, I'm Sal Pierre with your breaking news. In a dramatic escalation of tensions, President Donald Trump has imposed emergency tariffs against Colombia after a major diplomatic standoff over the deportation of migrants. This marks the first significant foreign policy clash under Trump's second term, as he looks to enforce his mass deportation strategy. On Sunday, President Trump announced a series of retaliatory measures after Colombian President Gustavo Petro blocked U.S. military deportation flights carrying migrants. In response, Trump declared a 25% tariff on all Colombian imports, which will escalate to 50% within a week. Additionally, he imposed a travel ban on Colombian citizens and revoked visas for Colombian officials, as well as their supporters. Trump's move comes after Petro's controversial decision to block the U.S. flights, which had been authorized by Colombia's government before being abruptly halted while the planes were en route. Petro defended his actions, calling for better treatment of migrants, and rejected claims that he had approved the deportation flights. His response was swift, announcing retaliatory tariffs on U.S. goods, including a 25% increase in import taxes on U.S. products. The diplomatic rout continues to unfold, with the U.S. Embassy in Colombia suspending visa processing for both immigrant and non-immigrant applicants in retaliation. The U.S. State Department also criticized Petro's actions, with Secretary of State Marco Rubio stating that Colombia had approved the flights before withdrawing authorization once the planes were airborne. Meanwhile, Petro has urged U.S. citizens living in Colombia illegally to regularize their status and criticize Trump's policies. He has also offered his presidential plane to assist in the repatriation of migrants back to the U.S. This incident highlights the growing tension between the U.S. and countries like Colombia and Brazil, as both nations condemn the treatment of deported migrants, including reports of degrading conditions aboard flights returning Brazilian nationals. The trade impact of Trump's tariffs could soon be felt, with Colombian goods like coffee, oil, and minerals making up a significant portion of U.S. imports. Economists have raised concerns that these tariffs could lead to higher consumer prices, especially for goods like coffee, which have already seen price increases. As the situation develops, President Trump has made it clear that this is just the beginning of his tougher stance on immigration. This marks a new chapter in his second term, where economic pressure may play a central role in achieving his immigration goals. Stay with us for more updates on this developing story. We just learned that in an attempt to resolve the diplomatic crisis over deportation flights, Colombia has announced plans to use its presidential plane to bring home migrants who were blocked from arriving on U.S. military flights. The Colombian government emphasized that this move was part of their commitment to ensuring the dignified return of its nationals and reaffirmed that Colombians would not be banished from their own country. In a public statement, Petro made it clear that Colombia would replace U.S. products with domestic alternatives, offering government support to help facilitate the shift.
Good evening, I'm Jackie Pierre with breaking news from Africa. In a dramatic escalation of violence in eastern Congo, M23 rebels, backed by Rwanda, have claimed control of Goma, the region's largest city, prompting the Congolese government to declare it a declaration of war. The M23 rebels announced their capture of Goma early Monday, after a 48-hour deadline they set for the Congolese army to surrender expired. The group urged the residents to remain calm and called on the Congolese military to assemble at a local stadium. The situation in Goma, a key city in Congo's mineral-rich North Kivu province, has caused mass panic among its 2 million residents, with many fleeing in fear. The United Nations reports that over a third of the population in the province is already displaced, and the capture of Goma is expected to worsen the humanitarian crisis. The UN-Special Representative in Congo, Bintou Keita, described the situation as chaotic and reported that the rebels were using civilians as human shields while advancing toward the city. The M23 fighters have also declared the airspace over Goma closed, trapping both civilians and humanitarian workers inside the city. In response, Congo's government spokesman, Patrick Muyaya, called for international support to protect civilians, stating that the country was now in a war situation. Meanwhile, the Congolese government has broken off diplomatic relations with Rwanda, accusing the neighboring country of supporting the M23 rebels, a claim Rwanda denies. Despite mounting evidence, The M23 has made significant territorial gains in recent weeks, with the rebels' offensive causing a large number of Congolese soldiers to surrender, many of whom are now under the protection of peacekeepers. The UNI mission in Congo, which includes forces from several countries, has been working to prevent the rebels from advancing further. However, the violence has already resulted in the deaths of several peacekeepers, including 2 from South Africa and 1 from Uruguay in the past 48 hours. The situation in Goma is rapidly deteriorating. Many displaced civilians are seeking refuge in neighboring Rwanda, but fears are growing about the safety of even those trying to escape the city. UNI Deputy Humanitarian Chief Joyce Masuya warned that if the fighting spreads into Goma, the consequences for civilians could be devastating. The international community has condemned the violence, with the US and France urging a ceasefire and calling on Rwanda to withdraw its support for the M23 rebels. But as the fighting intensifies, it remains unclear whether peace efforts will succeed or if the violence will continue to spread. Stay tuned for more updates on this developing story. I'm Jackie Pierre, and you're watching Sal's US and World News.
Good evening. I'm Ahmed Khan with a report on how global trade is evolving in the face of U.S. tariffs and President Trump's aggressive trade stance. While the U.S. has continued to implement tariffs under the Trump administration, many nations have opted not to retaliate but rather seek new trade partners, shifting the global trade dynamic. Since 2017, the U.S. share of global trade has steadily declined, while other regions, particularly Asia, Europe, and the Middle East, have seen growth. Despite holding a strong position in global finance, with nearly 70% of global equity indices and a rising share of global GDP, the U.S.'s role in global trade has diminished, now accounting for less than 15% of worldwide trade. During Trump's first term, global trade remained relatively stable, with countries both developed and developing seeing increased trade as a share of their GDP. This shift is particularly noticeable in countries like Japan, Italy, Vietnam, and Turkey. In contrast, the U.S. saw its trade share dip, marking a shift away from trade dependency. While President Trump's tariff threats have been aimed at countries like China, many nations have responded by seeking alternatives rather than retaliating directly. In the years since 2017, the U.S. has turned away from large trade partnerships, particularly with the EU and Asia, leaving the door open for other nations to form new deals. Meanwhile, the European Union and China have been busy negotiating new trade agreements, with China concluding multiple partnerships, including a major 15-nation pact in Asia. As President Trump enters his second term, global trade negotiations are intensifying. The EU recently finalized a long-awaited deal with South America's Mercosur bloc, while Mexico is expanding trade ties within Latin America as a safeguard against potential future tariff actions from the U.S. The result has been a noticeable shift in global trade corridors, with countries like China, Poland, and the UAE seeing significant trade growth. Experts warn that Trump's tariff policies, designed to strengthen the U.S., may instead push countries to bypass American markets in favor of new trade routes. Though Trump insists tariffs will restore U.S. power, the unintended consequence could be the erosion of America's relevance as a trading power, which could ultimately undermine its economic influence. With global trade increasingly centered in regions outside the U.S., the future of American trade relations remains uncertain. This has been Ahmed Khan reporting for Sal's US and World News. Stay tuned for further updates on this developing story.
This is Sal Pierre. Thank you for watching. We promise to bring headlines and detailed reports mostly as the events are happening. Please subscribe to the channel, like and share our videos. You'll be glad you did. See you at the next one.